Greetings, greetings, greetings. And if we have not said it in as much as we should have, we really want to start by saying we appreciate you all joining us these weeks for these sessions. We are closing in on our 100th consecutive week of doing this broadcast. And obviously, the fact that people take time to participate is a critical element in our ability to continue. So we appreciate all of you who are supporting. We hope you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual elevation, and that you're doing as well as possible. And if not, very soon you will break the threshold and be able to travel strongly in the direction that you want and need to go. We're thankful for you to join us today for Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And today's edition, we're going to go over chapter 4 of my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Chapter 4 is Building Community Defense Structures, how to build your political education structure. So today we're going to drill deep in the steps that you take to build a political education process. And by political education process, we're going to explain, we don't just mean people reading books individually or even reading books in a group together. That's not a political education process. That's a book club, which is wonderful. Nothing wrong with book clubs, but a political education process and ideological training process is a completely different entity. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, what that is and how you do it. So we start, as always, we want to pay respect to the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere who are fighting for their land back. That's how they achieve self-determination, is getting their land back. And guess what, you all? Their land is this land. There is no, this land is your land. No, it's their land. It was stolen from them. It's not yours if you're not indigenous to the Western Hemisphere. And by indigenous, we mean the people who refer to themselves as American Indian people, Chicanos, Latinos, Mexicanos, Puerto Ricanos. Those are the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. If you don't fit that classification and descend from the original indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, that is not who you are. So let's stop the confusion. And we also always respect our African ancestors. The real only reason why we are here today is because of their relentless struggle against empire for 530 years, from the eastern shores of Africa in the Indian Ocean all the way to the western shores of the Western Hemisphere in the Pacific Ocean. Our people have fought colonialism. Our people have fought slavery, have fought neocolonialism, have fought capitalism, and continue to do so. So we honor them for giving us the strength, the wisdom, and the inspiration to keep struggling for a better future for all of humanity. So we're thankful that all of you are here today for this very important session. We look forward to going through it, and we'll just start with our typical introductions. We'll do that right now. And again, person talking to you right now, I'm Ahjamu, longtime organizer in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the sponsoring organization for these broadcasts. I've done a lot of work for the party and plan to spend the rest of my days doing this work for however long that will be. And joining me, as always, every week is my daughter, Shukura, who grew up in the All African People's Revolutionary Party's Young Pioneer Institute program, and now as an adult is active as an organizer in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and is closing in on becoming the first doctor in our family history. So for that, we are thankful. We are certainly thankful and respectful. And I just love having the opportunity to share these organizing spaces with my only child. I mean, we organize this every week. We participate in task force work together in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We both are on our anti-patriarchy task force, and we do a lot of work. We're doing work now to attempt to expand our book list. And Shukura, myself, and three other wonderful comrades on the task force developed a list of books we want to add and a presentation. And we've done the presentation once to the task force itself, and we're going to have to do it again in a couple of weeks to some of our other structures to move the process along. So I'm just honored. You know, there are a lot of parents who have not had the opportunity to exist in such a positive way with their child the way I've been able to do with mine. So I'm extremely thankful, especially in this backward society where African fathers and children is looked at almost as something that doesn't exist. And, you know, if she and I were making videos of ourselves dancing together or putting each other down, that would be viral. But we're not doing that. We're doing this. And so I'm just thankful to share this space with her all the time. And getting back to the AAPRP, our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. That's the definition of Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. And the book on the right, Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. In that book, Nkrumah lays out the strategy that we are pursuing to bring about Pan-Africanism, which we believe is the solution to the problems that 2.5 billion African people face in over 120 countries in the world today. We don't believe that any African anywhere on earth will be free until Africa is free. We don't see how we can expect to have respect for each other and respect from other people when our mother is disrespected. So that's our work. And in that book, Nkrumah lays out the strategy, which is to unite all of the revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground in Africa who agree with this objective of Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. So there you see logos of many of the formations on the ground who do agree with that definition and who we work with on a regular basis to build this worldwide Pan-African fighting force, the Pan-African Congress of Azania, or what you call by the colonial name South Africa, the PAIGC, African Party for Independence of Guinea-Bissau, Democratic Party of Guinea, PDG there, ZAPO, which is another organization from Azania, Amilcar Cabral Ideological School, Nigeria, Zimbabwe Movement for Pan-African Socialists, Kenyan Revolutionary League, the Pan-African Union of Sierra Leone, and many, many others. And so we are building this worldwide fighting force. That's our work. And we have chapters all over the world. I've had the opportunity to participate in a number of them in Africa and throughout Europe, Canada, Caribbean, here in the United Snakes of America. And we have strong relationships with other liberation movements fighting against the same enemy we're fighting against, the Palestinian struggle, the Irish Republican Socialist struggle, the Filipino national liberation struggle, obviously the struggle of the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere against international capitalism and imperialism, the enemy of all of humanity. So again, we're thankful all of you are here, and we will start getting into the topic for today, how to build political education structures, from my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. And to get us started, I turn it over to Shukura.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. We welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of our Ancestors' Voices. We hope that you are safe, healthy, and well. And we are so excited to talk to you today about Chapter 4, because Chapter 4 focuses on how to build the reading materials. And if you're questioning, well, why do we need to be reading? The bottom line is, last week we talked about why the system of capitalism needs to fall. Today we're talking about why you need to know your timeline and know your ancestry and know other events from a historical and their historical and her historical timeline that have happened for you to understand what still needs to be a solution today. So basically, in order for us to organize and move forward, we must understand the root of why we are oppressed, which is where the research and the reading comes into play. And we can't just have individualized perspectives about things. We need to read collectively, so we're all reading the same material. And then we need to dialogue around that. There needs to be a facilitator who has developed discussion questions based on the reading that we all have done. And then we all come and meet twice a month, every 2 weeks, and we have different people rotate and facilitate those discussion questions. And we talk about what our takings of the readings were. We break those concept downs. If concepts are kind of abstract or hard to understand, that's what we do in work study. It's really not as intimidating as I think a lot of people imagine it to be. I think you do have to have a level of vulnerability, and some of us are not ready to do that yet. But if you are willing to be wrong, which is okay because you're not supposed to know everything, then having that vulnerability can actually be a tool, because that's where the humility comes into place. Because again, you're not supposed to know everything. And if you do know everything, then we would question, why have you not shared the secret with us and allowed all these years of oppression to continue happening if you did in fact have a solution that could eradicate all of that? So political education is the foundation for how we ascertain the information we need. Political education is the foundation for how we receive messages from our ancestors. Political education is how we deconstruct colonialism and deconstruct capitalist ideologies that have literally been planted in our brain cells. And that's how we literally remove that. Just like fresh oxygen going through the brain, we remove that and replace those ideologies that are negative and twisted and selfish. We replace those with collective socialist ways where we all can think about ways that manifest all of us to reach the highest level of not even just being oppressed, but having all of our resources and our powers based on our land ownership, based on how we organize crops, based on how we maneuver resources, and based on how we remove neocolonialists and any exploitation that presents itself in our homes. So be it Africa, be it the indigenous people's land here in the States or Canada or other parts of the world, once each respected group gets back to where they are supposed to be and they have their land and they have their resources, we can then start to decide how we're going to, as a community, move forward to use those same resources, because they will no longer be stolen from us and they will no longer be exploited from us. So it's really, really important to do political education, because if you are not interested in reading about what was, then how are you going to understand what can or what will be? That's literally the whole point of this chapter, is to help us understand we have to address it, and we have to be ready to learn, and we have to be ready to discuss, and we have to be ready to dialogue. Even if we struggle or disagree on something, we have to be ready to do that. So if you have turned into our ancestors' voices at all in the past, you already know that one of the most consistent themes is the need for political education. In fact, if you have ever participated in any All African People's Revolutionary Party event anywhere on earth, you know that is the foundation of the work we do. This is true because we think we all can agree that it is always in your best interest to have as much information about the forces you are struggling against as you possibly can at all times. Political education defined is not just reading books individually. It is not even belonging to any type of reading group where people read and discuss materials. When we say political education, what we mean is establishing and maintaining an ideological training process, family, where people study collectively and use the education they are gaining to go out and do political work designed to challenge the capitalist system and free the masses of humanity. So just to back up and make sure that last sentence really, really stuck with you, not only are we reading as a group and we're discussing as a group, we are digesting the material that we read together as a group. And then we also are holding one another accountable to take that same information that we just read and we just discussed and we just digested and apply it into the world to help eradicate some type of oppression. So, for example, currently in my work study group, we are reading Garvey and Garveyism, okay, written by, I think, the second Amy Jocks Garvey that was married to Marcus Garvey. And if I have the Amy's wrong, I apologize. And I'm sure my dad will help me out and help correct that. But the point being, we're reading Garvey and Garveyism now. And I am taking strategies from that book with the help of my work study, discussing, having different conversations. And I'm actually trying to use that in the work I'm doing here in Tennessee with the maternal and child health divisions that I belong to. I'm writing about it in my papers and my proposal for my dissertation. It's coming up in my research. I'm tying it into other things. When I'm publishing articles or publishing chapters in books, I'm talking about these concepts that are based on Pan-Africanism, because you can't just be with the same group of people every 2 weeks and discuss these ideologies and discuss these ideas and not let it leave that work study space. It literally becomes a part of you and you start to embody it. Why? Because you believe in it. Because you wouldn't invest so much time if you didn't think that this was worth it. More importantly, you wouldn't invest time if you didn't think that was the solution to help eradicate why people are experiencing such hardships around the world, especially if they are poor or especially if they identify as being non-white. So the point I'm making to you is you start to take on the readings. They start to become a part of you. You start to quote people that you've read. You hear my dad quote all the time different things that Kwame Ture says. I'm quoting all the time the things that Malcolm has said. That's because I literally just read his book and it's fresh on my brain. And he spoke to me when I read what he had to say. I clearly felt like I was in the audience listening to him in Harlem as I was reading Malcolm X Speaks. So these authors, they start to invest their scholarship in you. You start to embody it. You start to speak it. You literally bring their words to life as you are applying these methodologies that they have already laid out for us so that we can actually try to help the world be a better place. And we know that our comrades tried to do that when they were living. And because they tried to do that, they were taken from us and killed. So it's up to us to continue that. So yes, that's going to require some bravery. It's going to require some vulnerability. It's also going to require us to not think about ourselves, but to actually put our lives on the line because we're sacrificing for humanity. Because I don't know about you, but when I die, I want people to know that I gave a darn about someone other than myself. That is the most important thing to me. I do not want my unborn children to think that I was a coward, and I certainly don't want them to think that I was selfish. So we have to really, really think about what kind of actions we're taking, especially if we're not involved in organizations that are working for justice, and how are those actions contributing to humanity? Because it's not about you. Someone struggled and someone lost their life for you to be sitting here or standing here today listening to this broadcast. So we have to continue to think about that because we're not just pulling for the future to come. We're also trying to honor our ancestors because they could have made a lot of different choices that would have affected you and I being here today. So we have to continue to think about that. It's not even up for discussion. It's absolutely the only way that we continue to drive forward and really get rid of these isms that are causing so many people death, heartache, and pain beyond measure. Chapter 4, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist and Patriarchal and Fascist Violence, is dedicated specifically to addressing exactly what a political education process should look like, how you implement it and maintain it, and why it matters. It is our hope that you can use this session to understand deeper why we need to have organized political education everywhere and how you can embark upon implementing it yourselves, no matter what your individual reality and or conditions may be. Next slide, please. There is an extremely dangerous trend happening today that suggests that study isn't important and that study is even a bourgeoisie concept that isn't beneficial to the masses of people. This is troublesome, and this analysis is troublesome because it is actually one that originates from the capitalist system. Go figure, right? Their strategy has been to dumb down the entire world population to convince us all that we need to be concerned about our own individual lives. So as I just said, capitalism has taught us that it is okay to be selfish. That's what capitalism has taught us, okay? Don't misconstrue what I just said. That's why you probably have an individualized approach on how you do things. This is probably also why you don't think about your ancestors and you don't think about the world and you don't think about humanity as it relates to your decisions that you're making, because you're only in it for yourself. But we need to change that. That has not helped us at any way, shape, or form. And as I just said, if your ancestors had that same ideology, you biologically and ideologically would not be here today, right now. It's very, very simple. So we understand that our ancestors didn't do that, which means we don't have the privilege to do that, because the children who are not even conceptualized and born yet don't deserve that. So let's just already put that thought out of our minds and let's start to think more collectively and start to train our bodies and our minds to think more collectively, because that's how we're going to reach organization. If we selfishly think about reaching it, then we're not all going to reach it. Only one of us might think that they're doing something towards that. And that's actually going to set us further behind and waste more time. And I don't know about you all, but I'm ready to be free tomorrow, today, right now. I don't really have time to continue doing this. So let's continue to think about other people so we can make that a reality. So another way to think about that is to try to erase what capitalism has taught us about thinking of our individual lives. Our families, they've also taught that same methodology to our families. Our individual conditions, progress, and circumstances, all of that has been drilled into our head because we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps, when you and I both know that's not even the reality. I don't even own a pair of boots. And if I did, it's because someone else was exploited in a shop somewhere overseas where I can't even pay them the actual wages they deserve to make so that I can wear the boots. So again, we have to think about how many people were oppressed or exploited in order for me to have the materials that I have today. Another thing to think about is capitalism's desire to convince us that we need to not have any concerns about what is happening in the world, and that doing so is a complete waste of our time because it does nothing to contribute to our individual lives. Definitely not the case as we continue to think about how not only other people's actions affect us, but vice versa. They work overtime, capitalists, I'm saying, work overtime to convince you that the only method of politics that exists is that which is manifested in their bourgeoisie electoral political process. So they're drilling this ideology into your head every 4 years that your only responsibility for you to benefit, again, the individualism. Do you see the theme, the individualism theme? They're drilling that into your head every 4 years that you need to go out and you need to register to vote so you can be happy with the person in office that will benefit you based on your values. That's so dangerous. So dangerous. And we got to continue to think about how unrealistic that is, not to mention it has gotten us nowhere. It has absolutely gotten us nowhere. If anything, it has set us further behind and further back. All of these things are wrong. And most importantly, they're untrue. We all deserve truth, right? What we hope to accomplish today is to use chapter 4 to illustrate to you that political education is much more, and that we can ensure that a proper understanding of political education processes will make our work stronger and much more productive. Asante Sana, and join an organization working for justice.
And I appreciate you so much, daughter. And yes, you were correct. The Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey's second wife was Amy Jock Garvey, who was the author of Garvey and Garveyism. And his first wife was Amy Ashwood Garvey. And that's significant because both those Amys were as instrumental to the construction of the Universal Negro Improvement Association as Marcus Garvey himself. And if you know anything about African people's history, and I know most people don't, then you know that the Universal Negro Improvement Association was a Pan-Africanist organization. It was the largest organization we've ever had to date. A minimum of 3 million members, as many as 6 or 7 million. Their newspaper, the Negro World, was printed in 33 countries in English, French, and Spanish. And all of this was done over 100 years ago. So they definitely provide the model, and those two sisters were instrumental in bringing it about. So I want to talk about the myths about political education. But before getting into that, I want to just clarify and define in clear terms what we mean when we say political education processes, ideological training. What we're talking about, you all, is creating processes that train us to think and act like revolutionaries. That's what we're talking about. So that's why we say it's not just reading individual books, because you can read as many books as you want, and that does nothing to force you to change your life practices. You just have knowledge in your head, you know, whatever you retain from the books you read. You can read books in a group, and that does nothing to force you to have to change your lifestyle. But the purpose of political education processes is to create this ideological training process where you are accountable to the things that you study, and the expectation is that you will take that information and you will use it to organize and make the world a better place. That's why in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we call it work, study, work, study. We don't just call it study groups. We don't just call it work groups, because we know, like Kwame Nkrumah said, practice without theory is blind, and theory without practice is empty. So we need both. We need the study and the work. So anybody running around here talking about, well, we don't need to talk, we don't need to read books, we need action. That's a dangerous person. That's a dangerous person, because what they're saying is that we just need to fling around in the dark. And clearly, if you look at people, if you know people who believe that, and I'm sure you do because it's a commonly held belief, and you look at what is being accomplished, you can see, well, clearly that's not an effective strategy. It's not a sustainable nor effective strategy. And then if you look at the other side of the coin, people that just want to read books and don't ever want to actually do anything, and there's plenty of those people as well. If you look at the conditions on that, you can see, well, that's not an effective strategy either. That's not doing anything to move us forward. So when we say political education processes, we're talking about building processes that create revolutionaries. And the reason why we believe in that is because we do our absolute best to live that life, you all. Like, we don't just come on here one day a week and say all this stuff, and then last night I was at the club doing whatever I wanted to do to whoever I wanted to do it, lying. And that's not the lifestyle we live. It never has been, and it never will be. You know, we are committed to the principles and ideals that we articulate here. They are a part of our life. This a wonderful person I do these broadcasts with, she grew up with those principles. And so she can tell you that we did our absolute best to honor them. When she was in these schools and these teachers said reactionary things to her, you better believe we were up there in those people's faces. You will not push that nonsense on our daughter. We don't believe that. We are not, our daughter does not stand for your Pledge of Allegiance. This is an empire. We are here organizing to overthrow this empire. You will not have our daughter standing to a song celebrating 530 years of terrorism. You can call these schools here and they will tell you, yeah, they were always up here telling us that. And we demanded that our family and friends respect our principles. And as soon as they saw we were serious about them, there was never an issue with them doing that. I changed my name, as you want to call it, legally, whatever way you want to call it. I changed it. And I say that because a lot of people use names. They change their name every 5 minutes. But I changed my name to Ahjamu Umi, quote unquote, legally, because I don't recognize their legal system. But I'm saying that to make the point that that became the only name. Because I had someone the other day, they were like, I have these speaking engagements. They're like, so I need you to fill out this form. I'm like, okay. And then they were like, so what's your name? I'm like, you know my name. Well, what's your name with the IRS? I'm like, look, I only have one name. Okay. I'm not one of these people that requires all of us to call them an African name, but then when they deal with the Europeans is Willie Johnson. That's not me. I got one name. When I go to work, they got to deal with Africa when they call my name. That's the whole reason why I changed it in the first place. So, I was 22 when I changed my name, 1984. You would not, I can go down the list, you all, but just using that one example, you would not believe how much struggle I had to endure over that in the mid 80s. And it was all worth it. And the reason why I was able to do that. And I could tell you the same story about a whole lot of things, much more difficult than changing your name. But I'm using that as an example to make the point. The reason why we were able to shake it off and navigate through all that nonsense is because of the strong political education foundation that we had. And Shukura's mother and I, even though we have been divorced for almost 30 years, we have participated as co-parents. There's certainly things I could have done better now that I understand things better, but I think that we did an amazing job and we always work together. She has never not had both of her parents in her life, even though we've been divorced for 90% of her life. And that is only because of the political education foundation. So when we're talking about political education, we're not just talking about reading books. We're talking about transforming your life, you all. That's what this process is about. And so we're going to get into it. And I want to first just start by saying some of the myths about what political education is, because there's a lot of misinformation. This is a capitalist system. That's what it's built upon. And the first concept that we have to discuss is the belief, and Shukura mentioned it, that the definition of politics is bourgeoisie electoral politics. Like when you say the word political, the only thing you're talking about is bourgeois electoral politics. Who's going to hold office in the capitalist system? What is going to be the policy created in the capitalist system? That is not the definition of politics, you all. It's not even close. The definition of politics is understanding the forces that influence and impact your life and how to change them. That's the definition of politics. The forces that influence and impact your life and how to change them. That is the definition of politics. And so if you understand that, what Fred Hampton said makes sense when he said politics is war without bloodshed and war is politics with bloodshed. That's what that's saying, is that these are the forces that impact your life and how you dictate them. So understand that when we say political or politics, that's what we're talking about, the forces that impact your life. And then another myth is that the only thing that you ever need to understand about politics is that you have to vote. And again, that obviously is tied to the first myth, in that the capitalist system is overly focused and dedicated to ensuring that all of us, our only understanding of politics is within the realm of the capitalist system. Nothing outside of it. Anything outside of that is insane. So because of that, they have convinced millions of people here that voting in their elections, which is nothing more than just rubber stamping the agenda of the super rich multinational corporations. That's all you're doing when you're voting, is rubber stamping their agenda. They just want to make sure they can count on you to support their agenda. They don't want people rebelling and tearing up stuff. So to do that, they create this bourgeois process and they make everybody think that you have a voice. And then because people think that, you got all these people running around here saying ignorant things like, well, this is the freest, most democratic country in the world. And you just had supposedly they pulled the troops from Afghanistan. They're doing drone strikes all over the world. They just did some in Somalia, right? So I want to know, if it's so democratic here, who among you got a phone call saying, hey, I think that we're thinking about killing these people in Somalia, killing people in all parts of the world, and we just wanted to make sure, we talked to you and got your feedback on what you think about that. Who got that call? None of you all got that call. Maybe you didn't check your voicemail and it was there, but I don't think it was there, and it wasn't there because you don't have a voice in anything that happens in this society. Even like some people say, well, the local issues, I just focused on the local issues. I mean, even if you look at, like, I live in California, has a strong initiative process. I'm just saying, you all, like, if you have an argument that defeats what I'm saying, then let's engage it. But I'm saying that if you go up against multinational corporations in this state through this initiative process, even if you get the popular electoral vote to win, they will appeal it. It happened in 1988 with insurance reform. They were gonna cap how much insurance companies could charge California drivers for car insurance, because there's 40 million people in California. And it's a pretty much a car culture throughout the whole state. And so insurance rates are very high here. And so that was the purpose of that initiative. And it passed overwhelmingly, 70% to 30%. And the insurance companies immediately, the day that it passed, went to court, filed an appeal. They have the money to do that. They have lawyers on retainer everywhere. And here we are, almost 35 years later, your insurance rates here in California ain't no less than they ever have been. You don't even know, you can't even say what happened with Proposition. I think it was Proposition 103. You can't even say what happened to that proposition. Nothing happened to it. And then what they do now is they just mobilize lies. Like there was a decent initiative on the last election ballot in 2020 about taxing corporate property taxes to get more money from multinational corporations. And they just lied to everybody about what it represents because they know y'all don't study nothing. And so, of course, it failed. So, you know, that's as long as they got you in that bucket, they got you exactly where they want you. So we don't want to hear nothing about no local politics. We are fighting to destroy this entire, y'all go ahead and support your local politics. We're going to destroy this whole system. And then another myth is that I don't have to belong to an organization to be politically educated. So, you know, this is like someone, I was talking to someone about organization the other day, and this person told me, well, I don't deal with organizations. I'm a free agent. And I said, so what free agent you know that's not looking for a team? Like, that's the whole point of being a free agent, so you can find a team to play for. That's what the game is all about, since you're using that term. So it just doesn't make any sense, you all. Like, you see it all the time. Well, I'm a socialist, but you're not a part of a socialist organization. So how are you? Socialism is an action item, you all. It means you're working towards something. It's not just you read socialist books. That doesn't make you a socialist. The only thing that makes you a socialist is you're studying the concepts of socialism and you're involved in a collective organization designed to bring those concepts into real life existence. If you're not doing all those things, you're not a socialist. It's like saying that you're married, but you don't have a partner. Just because you, in your head, you believe in marriage, there's some action required to meet that criteria. You don't just have, like I was at an event, I was telling Shukura this the other day, I was at an event here years ago, and this brother had written a book, and I bought a copy of his book. It was on police terrorism. And he was saying that during his presentation, he was saying, well, I kind of want to see myself as a revolutionary. And people in the event were saying, well, if that's how you see yourself, then that's who you are. And I said, no, I mean, with all due respect, revolutionary has criteria attached to it. It's not like being a Christian, no shade against that, but you can raise hell on Saturday night, go to church on Sunday and repent and get baptized, and you're a Christian. Being revolutionary doesn't work like that. It requires you to fulfill certain criteria. In the All African People's Revolutionary Party, some of that criteria that we have is you have to be a consistent member for 5 years. You have to have reached a certain point in our ideological training guidelines process. You have to be engaged in certain work. You have to be producing consistent propaganda, which is what we're doing right here. You have to be recruiting people. You have to be building alliances with our other organizations, like the American Indian Movement, for example. You have to be facilitating that work. All that stuff has to happen. You don't just get to say, well, I'm a revolutionary because I read a book on revolutions. That's a very low bar. So that's a myth. If you want to call yourself a revolutionary, you have got to be in a revolutionary organization. If you are not, then all you are is someone who practices intellectual masturbation. That's all you're doing. So that's a myth. Another myth is I can be a revolutionary and socialist without organization and without a political education process. Like I hear this all the time. Well, I don't have to be involved in that. You know, again, this is this bourgeoisie individualist culture. Like whatever type of concepts I can just create in my head, then that can be my reality. You know, that's idealism, you all. Like there is criteria here. You have to be involved in a process. You can't just say I'm a brain surgeon because you just decided one day that you liked the way that sounded. You have to carry out certain work to get yourself in a position to qualify to be a brain surgeon. Well, I don't know about you, but I respect the struggles of the masses of people much more than I respect any individual's quest to become a brain surgeon. So there's no way I'm going to respect that process more than I respect the process for our liberation. So yes, I have absolute respect for our revolutionary process. And so people need to be accountable to respecting that process. And that means there's requirement. And if you're not fulfilling that those requirements, you're not doing it. Doesn't make you a bad person, but that's a fact. So these are myths about political education that have got to go. So the next question is how we practice in political education processes. Like, how do we build that process to help us move in this direction we've been talking about? So again, got to say this all the time because it's, it's, again, we have these bourgeois ideals and we think that, when we say we're going to start something, it has to be 250 people to start. And if it's not that, then we're not doing anything. Well, that's an idea that came from our enemies. So as long as they got you thinking like that, because you're not going to do this work and have 250 people to start. If you were, we wouldn't even need to be doing this, because that would mean we'd have the level of consciousness would be high enough that we wouldn't even need to have this. So clearly that's not the reality you're going to experience when you start with this type of work. Instead, what you're going to have is many times when nobody shows up, or maybe one or two people show up. And the point I'm making about this is we've got to stop looking at that like that's a problem. I hate going to sessions and 2 or 3 people show up and they're just talking and the time goes on and you don't start the work that you came there to do. If you got 2 people, get to work, start the process. You will be able to recruit other people into it as you go, but you have to establish that you respect the work that you say you're there to do. So respect it. So it doesn't matter how many people you have. If you have 2 or more people, that's enough to start. So you can establish, well, what we're going to do. Now, in the APRP, we have that established. Like Shukura said, we meet every 2 weeks. For the cadre circles, the experienced members, like myself, that can vary because you get to a point where you can determine what that is. But I have a cadre circle I participate in. We meet once a month. And then I sit in to help Shukura in her circle with the people in her circle. And they meet every 2 weeks. So when you join, you meet every 2 weeks. You meet for 3 to 5 hours, generally, whatever the group decides. Like she said, we have an established book list, and you read 70 pages every 2 weeks, 5 pages a day. And we encourage people to do that because people aren't used to reading, so that helps you train yourself. We rotate who's going to facilitate the meeting, and this is important because we're trying to build cadre leadership, which means collective leadership. We don't believe in one leader. We don't think that that's a sustainable model. So we believe that the masses of people make history because that's African culture is collective. So we don't believe that there should be, I saw these videos where they're talking about the Bloods and the Crips in the California prisons and how they're different from the Aryan Brotherhood, because the Aryan Brotherhood has, these shot callers, the 1 or 2 people that make all decisions, and the Bloods and Crips don't have that. And they were saying that that was a negative thing for the Bloods and Crips. And I understand how they were framing that, but I also understand our culture. That's not our culture to do things like that. So that's why it doesn't happen. So we advance collective leadership in the APRP. So that means we want everybody to develop the skills to lead. So you do that because when you read the materials and you develop questions and you lead discussions, then that enhances your confidence. And that puts you in a position where you can begin to develop a vision for how to do the work. And we want everybody to be able to do that. So that's very important. And then the next thing is that you have to institutionalize primary reading sources. This, the importance of this cannot be overstated. And it is something that the overwhelming majority of people just simply do not understand. And the reason why there's so much confusion about this is that people honestly believe that if they read something, no matter who the source is that produced what they're reading, that we have such an individualistic interpretation of the world that we think that because we read something, we understand the issue. And, give you an example of how absurd that is. So anyone that knows me well knows that I believe that Parliament Funkadelic is the best musical ensemble ever created, with the possible exception of Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's just what I believe. And so I've seen Parliament Funkadelic probably about a dozen times in concert. And if I have any chance to see them again, I will do that for the rest of my days. And so I love their music. I grew up on it. I listened to it. I love the messages that they subtly put into the music when I was a child. Like, we have come to reclaim the pyramids. When I was a child, that had a tremendous impact on me. Think it ain't illegal yet. Here's our chance to dance our way out of our constrictions. That was powerful stuff to a kid growing up in the inner city in San Francisco in the 1970s. That really did a lot. And so I love their music. And recently I watched a documentary on Netflix, and these Netflix documentaries, man, they're really doing a propaganda number on our history. But anyway, they had one on George Clinton. They had all the people, obviously, if you know anything about Parliament Funkadelic, obviously they've been around 50 years, and they have dozens of members that have participated in the group. That was one of their major contributions to the industry, is they had 7 or 8 different groups, same people on different record labels making music. And that was their way to circumvent the industry. That's why they had Parliament with one sound, Funkadelic with another sound, Bootsie's, Rubber Band. They had all that going. So some of the people who didn't feel like they got paid in this documentary, they were, slamming George Clinton. Okay. And then, that's it. So the way people function in this society is that they'll watch a documentary like that, and you ask them, and they'll say, yeah, I studied Parliament Funkadelic, because they watched the documentary. When clearly this documentary I'm not saying what was in there wasn't true or that it was true, but I'm saying this was clearly, if you know anything about the history of the group, it was clearly orchestrated by the people who had access to grind. Maybe, I'm sure they were legitimate access, because the entertainment industry, I write books, so I have publishing contracts. So I can tell you the entertainment industry is a criminal enterprise. So I'm sure they're correct. But my point is that that's not research, you all. That you'd have to watch that documentary. You'd have to read George Clinton's autobiography, which I did that. You'd have to study all the musicology of the past. You'd have to do a lot of different sources to be able to synchronize what you've studied and come to an analysis based on what makes the most sense, what's the most objective. So primary sources means if you're going to talk about Cuba, then you have to read primary sources from Cuba. If you want to read something from ABC News, no problem with that. But you should start by reading In Defense of Capitalism by Fidel Castro, Capitalism in Crisis by Fidel Castro, Women in the Revolution by Fidel Castro, Vilma Espin, all of the diaries by Ernesto Che Guevara that talked about the Cuban Revolutionary War, then the Cuban military experience in the Congo, and then Cuba's experience in the force that they sent to Bolivia, where Che unfortunately lost his life. You have to study all of that. And then from there, then you can read some non-primary sources. There's some great ones out there. We Are Cuba, that just the book, the multi-volume book, one of the best books I've ever read on Cuba. But my point is that I see a lot of hit jobs, especially now, against the Cuban Revolution. And I see a lot of people, for whatever their own individualistic reasons, they don't want to support the Cuban Revolution, even though they might consider themselves revolutionaries or progressive people. But the problem these folks have when they talk to me is that if you're going to talk about the Cuban Revolution with me, you really need to know what you're talking about. Because I've spent decades studying this revolution, traveling there, doing the work. So I'm not saying that I know more than everybody, but you got to do better than just bringing me some random person that was born in Cuba. That is not going to work. That is not going to work. So the primary sources, you have to look at that first. And then whatever you want to read to supplement that, that should come after that. And then you can compare the two. if that's what you need to do. But the point about that is that no one listening to this would accept someone talking to someone that knew you, especially someone that didn't like you, and then writing a book about you based on what that person told them. No one listening to this would accept that. You would say immediately, they didn't talk to me. Well, that's because they didn't use primary sources. That's why that's a critical part of study, okay? And then we also have to integrate the study component with other components that are critical. Criticism, self-criticism is a fundamental component of an ideological training process. If you don't have a strong criticism, self-criticism process, then you're not doing a political education process. And I talk about this extensively in the book, but for this space, I'll just say that when we say criticism, self-criticism, we are not talking about a check-in, you all. We are talking about a process you put in place where you are using criticism as a tool to make you and the comrades you're struggling with better. So if someone's not reading, which is always a challenge, then why are they not reading? That needs to be a discussion. It can't be like, well, it's my business, I don't want to talk about it. No, that won't fly in this organization. You got to talk about it. That's what we do. So what is the problem? Well, I'm busy. Well, that's not really the reason. You know, what is the real reason why you're not reading? And usually when you drill down a discussion, it's because people don't like to read. People don't like to read in this society, really. It's not a priority. And they don't do it, because when you break it down, like people always tell me I don't have time, but they spend all this time watching TV. Then after they tell me they don't have time to read, they start telling me about the TV shows they watch. And I'm like, you just told me you didn't have time to read. There's your time right there. Or how much time they sit around getting high. Yeah, there's your time right there. So this has to be struggled over. And like Shukura said, it's not going to be easy. But if you do it in a principled way, and what we mean by principle is that the purpose of criticism, self-criticism, is not for you to use criticism as a weapon against anybody. The purpose of it is to create a culture and environment where we can lift each other up. So once we establish that you don't have good time management, and that's the real reason why you're not reading, then now it's my responsibility to help you. So maybe that means, hey, can I call you on Tuesday night and we read the 5 pages together that day? And then that'll inspire you. And then we get 2 or 3 other people to do that. And that'll inspire you to do the reading all the other days. Things like that. It's my responsibility to help you. I can't just say, well, that person ain't serious. They don't want to read. I don't want to talk to them anymore. If you use criticism, self-criticism in the way that it's designed, that the Democratic Party of Guinea and Secretary gave it to us, then that's the example I just gave is how it works. But as Shukura said, it requires people being courageous, being honest, and that means all of us looking in the mirror and saying that this process we want to give the best that we can give to. We don't want to just be here half-assing. And if we do that, then that really makes the process so much stronger. And then democratic centralism, we talk about it in the book. There's so much we can do our ancestors' voices just on democratic centralism. But what I will say about it is that everybody that I see criticizing it, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And when we say democratic centralism, y'all got to remember, we are revolutionary Pan-Africanists. Don't bring your communist parties from Europe to us. That has nothing to do with us. That's your problem. Those of you from Europe, that's your history. That has nothing to do with us and how we do things. So you saying that to us you may as well just be talking to a brick wall, because I'm someone who's practiced democratic centralism in this organization for 37 years. So I don't need anybody just telling me what they thought somebody told them what democratic centralism was based on the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. That means nothing to me. And I probably studied more about the Bolsheviks and Mensheviks than you have anyway. So it's irrelevant. The way we use democratic centralism is you have the democracy is everybody's voice gets heard. And I've sat in too many meetings for hours and hours going over the same material over and over because someone wanted to hear it a little differently, to have any patience with someone telling me there's no democracy in democratic centralism. I've seen it. I've lived it my whole adult life. And then the centralism is that at some point we have to come to a decision. And it's the responsibility of everyone to support the collective decision. The 51% of the people decided, even if it was not the side of the position that you yourself agreed with, you still have a responsibility to support the position. And we've given examples of that before. So, and the work must be guided by these principles at all times. That's everything has to be based in that. You know, all these community defense projects that I'm working with, people fight so much. They don't want to study. They don't want to read. They just want to go out and do stuff. And I have to fight with people. Like, we have to read. We have to study. We got to study primary sources. It's more work. But what in this world do you get something out of it, and you're not, if you don't put anything into it? The work you're putting into it will grow. People tell me all the time, man, I wish I could articulate things the way you, okay, this is how you do it. This is how it happens. You don't just wake up one day and it's there. You got to do the work to make it happen. So organizing those tools, you got to establish a reading list. You know, we have one in the APRP. We have one, our reading list has sections and it has books in it. African history, Pan-Africanism, socialism, colonialism, neo-colonialism, Zionism, capitalism, scientific socialism, anti-patriarchy. These are all the areas that we have study materials, and we read books that speak to those areas. And again, you know, this session is only an hour. We can't tell you everything in an hour, but we say all the time, if you're serious about wanting to start a political education group, we are here to help you do that and walk through all these processes in great detail. We're doing a lot of that right now. I'm doing it for people in 5 different cities right now. So happy to do it. This is why we're here. So you got to establish a reading list, what books you want to have on your list. And you got to establish your meeting norms, like how frequently you're going to meet. Is it going to be once a week? Is it going to be once a month? Is it going to be every 2 weeks? What is it going to be? And your rotation process. You can rotate by alphabetical order. Have somebody facilitate, have somebody take minutes, and have everybody practice doing all of those things so everybody can appreciate and respect all of those roles. We don't just want to have women taking minutes. We want everybody to do that. We don't want to put that burden on women and marginalized genders. We want everybody doing that. So that's why we rotate. And so you establish that. And then, as I said, the criticism, self-criticism strengthens accountability for everyone, you all. Democratic centralism, properly understood, strengthens our structures. And political education processes coupled with community defense projects, this is how we really begin to lift the work. And I'll just say, like, I get it. I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult because this is a lot of work to do this. It's not easy. So if you're looking for an easy way, I'm not talking to you, you know, because this is not going to be easy. You know, these people spent 530 years building an outstanding system of oppression and exploitation. It's not going to be easy to lift people out of this. But for those people that understand and are committed to making the world a better place and realize they want to put some energy into doing it, we can and will win. We will win. So, as I said, we're here to help you. The only thing we ask is that you be serious. Don't waste our time. Don't say, yeah, I want to have a meeting and don't show up. Don't reach out and say I can't make. Don't waste my time, because I've got other people that want my time. So if you're not serious, then do whatever you need to do to get serious, and then let's do the work. You know, come back and then we can do it. And that'll be great. So again, chapter 4 is about how to build these processes. And we want to give you a snapshot today. We hope we've done that. And we want to ask you, if it sounds interesting to you, to reach out to us and we'll help you figure out how to do it. You can join the All African People's Revolutionary Party if you're African and participate in ours. And you can go to there in the middle of the page, aprp-intl.org. You can find out how to do that. We encourage you to do that. You're not committed to become a member of the APRP just by participating in work study. Work study is a program of the APRP. And I'll be honest, some of these people out here, we don't really want you to, you're not ready, do some internal work, okay? But if you want to check it out and see. Yes, we would love to have you do that. Please come and do that. And we want to invite you next week, October 17th, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. We're going into Chapter 5, a guide for organizing defense, Chapter 5. And that chapter is building and sustaining community defense work. How do you keep the work going? How do you start a project and keep it going? What things do you need to do? We're going to break that down. Very, very, very important. So we ask you to join us, let people know, tell people so they can come and participate. Very important. And you can go to abetterworld.me there, donate while you're there. That would be great. But if you want to reach out, like if you say, hey, I want to know more about how to build these political education processes, that would be the way to do that. That's the best way to reach me. So go ahead and contact us there. I'm also an editor for the Hood Communist Collective. We come out every Thursday with new articles at hoodcommunist.org. So check that out. We also have the bi-monthly Telegram event. We have a radio program. So go to the site and learn about those things. Support revolutionary African voices, you all. That's what this is all about. And those other events we have there, other comrades in the APRP all over who are doing them. The Pontula podcast on Mondays, the Revolutionary African Women Raw, the last Saturday of the month. The Forward Ever broadcast is on Spotify. The comrades in our New Mexico chapter do a news broadcast every Thursday at 12 noon Mountain Time. So we invite you, right here we have 6 or 7 independent revolutionary African voices programs. So please support them. Tell people about them, please. And please continue to buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Get you somebody else to get it and build a political education process. Whatever proceeds come from the book, they go right back into the work. Like I have a community defense project that I'm working with here in the city I live in. And we have, trying to, again, get them to engage in political education. So I have to print off materials, I have to get it started. And the idea is that they will begin to take on roles with it. But, I have to pay to print this stuff off. So that's what I use the proceeds I get from the book to do, that kind of work. So we appreciate each and every one of you. We hope that you see the message that we wanted to deliver to you today about political education processes. You want more, abetterworld.me, please reach out. We want you to enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. We appreciate you coming here today. Please tell a friend, please tell an enemy, just anonymously. If you can find a payphone or something, call up the police and tell them, yeah, these revolutionary programs, write this down so y'all can listen. It's okay if you do that, because if you do that, they're going to tell you, oh, we already know all about that. We're all on top of that. We participate in it. They're more consistent than some of the other people in participating. But thank you for coming. Forward ever, backwards never. See you again next week. We are moving forward, marching for one unified socialist Africa. White supremacy is cancer. It's got to go. Patriarchy is cancer. It's got to go. And capitalism, y'all already know it's got to go. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon.